Was nice, wasn't it? How you doing? I thought I would do a quick thing because we're stuck in traffic. I'll be honest with you. We're stuck in traffic right now, my wife and I. I'm not driving, don't worry. Because if I am, I'm doing it hands-free. I don't drive. So I thought I would do a quick thing while people are coming in. Do me a favor, retweet this puppy. On the continuing Soros Scott Adams thing, Scott's continuing to talk about it. On his Periscopes, I'm continuing to talk about Scott talking about it. I'll just jump right into it. But do me a favor, retweet this. So, understanding how Soros operates is actually key to understanding the world that we live in, particularly the world of fake news. Allow me to explain. And one of the things you have to realize is so much of what you see on TV is literally being funded at every point by Soros and Open Society, that it creates the illusion of consensus, which is the goal. So one of the things that Scott said is, well, one of the worst things he found about Soros is he funded Media Matters. Okay, but it's important to understand that Media Matters does not operate in a vacuum. And groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center do not operate in a vacuum. They operate in an environment where each one of them serves a role. And that role, for instance, the purpose of the Southern Poverty Law Center is to declare fake news. Except, by the way, Media Matters, when they've been around, what you learn very quickly, so at first they seem like a media watchdog, right? Media Matters, they're a media watchdog, except they're a media watchdog very specifically that never goes after Hillary. They will go after Democrats sometimes, but only when they're Hillary Clinton's opponents. And in fact, that's why I realized this about Media Matters a while ago, when people who I knew, like Eric Bollard, who works at Media Matters, put out a book. And I'm featured in the book. It's called Bloggers on the Bus. And then I realized he'd spun the story about me, which at the time I was on the left. It was a positive thing. It was a positive. It wasn't negative about me. But he'd spun it in such a way, it was about my reporting on John Edwards, that it was obvious to me that it was for Hillary. So one of the things about the Soros network of groups is that they portray themselves one way. Oh, we're a media watchdog. And they get taken that way by a lot of people on the left and in society. In fact, Cenk Uygur at Young Turks, I ran into him during the 2016 Republican convention. I know him a little bit from when I was on the left. Introduced him to Steve Bannon at the time. And Cenk said to me, he's like, I'm curious about how you moved over to the right. And we're talking about Media Matters. He said, I just realized that they're just shills for Hillary. Well, he'd been around for a while, but he did not really, he was being very sincere. It took him a while to realize that. So you have to understand that, and if you look at Soros's background, when he started doing philanthropy, he would go into a country and literally fund every single group. Now, the other area, and I would suggest, again, someone tell Scott, when you look up the 1995 interview with Charlie Rose and Soros, it's online, you can find it. Soros talks about something. This is when he just was getting into philanthropy. And he talked about the potential for corruption with philanthropy. And he's very articulate about it. Soros says that when you give people checks, they do what you want, right? They have a tendency to go along with the agenda that they know you're in favor of. And this is why I pointed out one of the real dangers of Soros right now is that he funds groups on the left, but he also funds the Atlantic Council. And so this is why you have no anti-war movement on the left. And I know this, I've interviewed people, I do a radio show all the time. I've talked to people in the anti-war movement. We had Cindy Sheehan on last week. Whatever you think of Cindy Sheehan, she knows the anti-war movement. We have Medea Benjamin on the show pretty frequently. There is no organized anti-war movement in this country right now, and that's due to George Soros. because his funding of the Atlantic Council, in addition to funding groups like the ACLU and the NAACP, has neutered them on issues that he cares about. That's what's going on right now, right? Now, the problem with this is that, let me just say something about Scott Adams for a second. The problem with this is Scott is presenting himself, and I don't believe he's doing this dishonestly. He's presenting himself as, I just want a cogent, clear, short explanation. But when one is presented to him, it's not sufficient, because he's not actually coming from a position of ignorance, like he's never heard of Soros. He's coming from a position of open skepticism, which is totally fine. But this is why I've said, when someone's openly skeptical, this is why I've offered. I said, let's have a discussion, the two of us, about it. So that's why when I said, for instance, you can go back and you can find the tweet. A few days ago, I said, Soros is different than other institutional funders on the left, such as the Ford Foundation, in terms of his scope and breadth. Now, Scott has said, I'm just looking for a clear, concise explanation without detail. I just gave you one. What I just said is one. It's not word salad in any way. I don't know what you don't understand. Do you not understand what the institutional left is? I'll explain that. And I'll give a short explanation to that. The institutional left are the groups such as the Ford Foundation, the Kellogg's Foundation, right? Soros' Open Societies Foundation. There's a number of them that do philanthropy, and they typically fund progressive left-wing causes. Philanthropy Unbound is another one. And they spend millions or billions of dollars doing so. And they fund civil society groups, which include everything from political parties to activist organizations to unions and so on. There you go. That's what the institutional left is, right? That's a nice general explanation. But if you're approaching it skeptically, well, why is that a bad thing? And so this is what happens. Every time he's looking, he goes, well, okay, but lots of people fund things. Okay. Well, so then I said the international scope of what he does, and then I mentioned specifics. I say, such as International Renaissance in Ukraine. Go look that up. Well, I don't know what the response there is. That's different than the Koch brothers. And by the way, I addressed that, and I addressed all of this in that original video that I did for Scott. All of this was addressed methodically, where I said one of the differences between Soros and the Koch brothers is they're not getting involved in Hungary and Macedonia and Poland and, right? That's all true, but it's general. Now, do you want to talk specifically about what Soros did and how it fits into Civil Society 2.0? Well, I don't know. You know what? If you don't know what civil society is, which I defined in that other video too, most people don't know what civil society is. And most people don't know what Civil Society 2.0 is. I'm being very specific. Civil Society 2.0 is a policy that was implemented by by Hillary Clinton's State Department that funded and trained activists. So do you want a short version why Soros is bad? He helped overthrow the Ukrainian government working with the Obama State Department under Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. He helped overthrow the government of the Ukraine that was democratically elected, replace it with somebody who was picked by Victoria Nuland. And if you don't believe that, there's a phone call. It's not derangement syndrome. This is all facts. So as soon as Scott starts with Soros derangement syndrome, that's okay. You're starting from an extreme skeptical position. But you can't have it both ways, Scott. You cannot have it where you say, on one hand, I'm just looking for a simple explanation. Then I give you a simple explanation, or someone else give you a simple explanation, and you start talking about Soros derangement syndrome. You're starting from a position, and it's very wrong. It's very, very, very wrong. Provably wrong. Because Soros is not just the average institutional left funder. Because, as I say, the Ford Foundation, other people, he's also a political funder. Aha. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, he's also put in gigantic amounts. He was the single biggest funder to Hillary Clinton in 2015, for instance. That's on the record. So he's not just a person who gives $1,000. He's not just a person who gives $1,000 and also supports a group. He's a person who supports literally dozens and dozens and hundreds of groups. So, Soros derangement syndrome is when you see the caravan and you say he's funding it and you don't have proof. I haven't said that. I don't know who's funding the caravan. I barely looked into it. He's certainly funded plenty of groups that are open borders. And they're very explicit about being open borders. And I've documented that all. So that's the frustration. For somebody who's spent thousands of hours, I've written articles on it. I've talked about it. But I don't know I just don't know what Scott's looking for. Does that make sense? I just don't know. And that's why I said I'm open to a dialogue. I'm open to a discussion on it where I can say to him, okay, what part of that is not compelling to you? Do you have a counterexample of where the Koch brothers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars overseas to overthrow a government? Do you have a counterexample where people have broken the Bank of England, for example? I can bring up other people who've done things, right? It's not like Soros is the only person who's done certain of these things, but he's the only person who's done all of them to the extent he has. So that's it. There's some specific detail on it, but I'm going to go because traffic's moving. Love you guys. Hopefully this makes some sense. If someone, again, I'm totally open. None of this comes from a place of, I think Scott's an important figure. I think his skepticism is important and good. But he's got to get this, or I got to say it, he doesn't get anything that's going on in the world. Right now, Scott Adams does not understand the world as it exists. Because the world as it exists right now is massive propaganda that is pushed by people like Soros, who fund groups all over the place. And then what you see on TV is experts funded by him, talking about events funded by him, populated by people funded by him. And that is unusual in the history of propaganda. That's unusual that you control so many things. And just as one simple example, I went down the list of every group that was at the Women's March. I quit after the first 15. They were all funded by Soros. So Soros was funding all the groups the day after the inauguration at the Women's March. I was there, 1 million people in the street. He's funding everyone I found. So he's funding a major amount of them, whose goal is to impeach the day after the inauguration the candidate that he'd supported, Soros supported, Hillary Clinton, with money. He didn't get it through the election, so he's trying to have a coup, basically, right? And that's what they've been fomenting. And by the way, by funding the Ukrainians who were directly behind the Mueller investigation, the Comey malfeasance, and this is provable too. NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of the Ukraine, directly connected. And by the way, Sergei Leshchenko, who's also the guy who brought the Manafort dossier out, Sergei Leshchenko, funded by Soros. Now again, I guarantee you Scott Adams has no idea who Sergei Leshchenko is right now. Sergei Leshchenko's a Ukrainian, I'll do a short summary, Ukrainian politician, activist, and journalist funded by Soros, who was the person behind the Manafort ledger. Him and NABU gave Leshchenko. If you don't believe me, go look up Sergei Leshchenko Manafort ledger. Google that. Go to YouTube. You'll find all these videos. He's the main guy, Sergei Leshchenko, and he's funded by Soros. It's not conjecture. So that's what it is. So it's like you say. I don't know. I wouldn't be spending the time. Except I do think that he's a creative person. He's a smart person. And boy, it'd be nice if we were in reality on this. But right now, he's just not. Anything I can do to help. Call me, Scott. DM me, anything. Let me know. Anyway, love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey, I'm just going to mention this real quickly. At the end, Scott, you should stop watching now. unless you want to chip in. We're going through this fundraising thing. I'm just going to mention it. We got a PayPal donation thing up there. You'll be able to find it. We're in an important period. I got some really cool stuff brewing. I cannot wait to show you. I've been hinting at it. I've been showing you screen captures. We got really cool stuff coming. But so I'm putting out a lot of money doing this cool stuff, and I gotta start recouping it because I'm really broke right now. Anyway, love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.